And that's the case with our speaker tonight. I've known Cynthia since I was a child in the 4th Ward of Abingdon. Worked with her at the railroad. Quick aside, she learned how to work yard control. It's a clerical job akin to being a, what do you call it, at an airport?
Air traffic control.
Yeah, it's that difficult. She learned it and she did well at it. Her dad was a prominent citizen in Abingdon years ago, Art Turner. Cynthia will talk about him and the rest of her family. Cynthia.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Lower that down a bit.
That's fine. Mark Twain said it usually takes him about 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. But somehow, a friend of mine, we won't mention any names, right, Mike? Convinced me about a week and a half ago to do a talk to people that I didn't know if I'd know him or not. So he owes me big time right now. To start off with, I'd like to ask you just a simple question. Have you ever thought about being born black and living in a small, totally white community? Or being born white and living in a totally black community? Think about it for a moment. 95% of you haven't done it or really haven't thought about it. Why? Because I don't think it usually happens too often. Well, my family and I did. My family lived in Abingdon, which is approximately 10 miles from here. It was at that time what we would call a white community, and pretty much still is. You know, I see people, I see mixed children going through the street, and every once in a while I see a black person, but not too often still after all, after I'm, and I'll say 50 years, how's that? There were a few Italians who lived there, and that was the main difference. Most of my family lived there most of their lives. My name is Cynthia Edmonson, born Cynthia Turner to Arthur and Cecil Turner of Abingdon, Illinois. Altogether, there are 7 children in my immediate family. My brother Philip is the oldest. He's 5 years older than me. Then came Margaret, then Robin, after Robin, and then 2 years Leslie, who's here with me tonight. 3 years later, my brother Arthur, and 3 years later, my sister Janet. We had a nice family, and we were happy, and always sat down at a large dining room table to eat our meals together. We lived with my grandma, Minnie Turner. It was her home. Do a picture for me? Okay. This is a picture of my family way back when I was a baby. It's a picture of my mom and dad. My grandmother is the oldest one there, and then my brother Philip and me. And I think that was taken in like 1952. Flip it again for me, please. And this is kind of the family as it's growing, growing more people. I think it's my sisters and that. I can't really say it, so I'm a guess. My dad was born in Abingdon, November 16th, 1910. He married my mother, Cecil Cheney, at Fort Madison in 1945. By the time I was born, some of them had died or moved away, but at one time, there was at least 2 black families in Abingdon. I don't know a lot about Abingdon family history because my dad died when I was 16, and my grandmother, who knew a wealth of history, died when I was 19. And at that time, I didn't have a lot of interest in family history. I wish now that I would have, because, my grandmother would have been the really only tie for us to know anything. Her brother Arthur died, and his children moved away except my cousin Lucille and her daughter Myrtle. There was still 2 black families in Abingdon. Also, my mom and dad were only children. So there were no aunts or no uncles, no first cousins to tell me anything. You know, there's still not. You imagine that. No aunts or uncles. No first cousins, except my mom's aunts and uncles. And they, of course, they didn't know much about us being in Abingdon because they lived in another, you know, she was from St. Louis. My mom and dad, though, they had 7 kids. Can you imagine that? It was like 7. And I'm glad they did because that's the relatives I have now. My mom was from St. Louis, so she didn't know a lot about the Woodson Turner family either. My grandma, who lived to be 93, was almost deaf most of her life from an accident when she was young. So to talk to her took a lot of work, you know, to mouth things. And if you couldn't, then if it was something really important, you wrote it down on a piece of paper so you could get it right. My father died in 1967, as I previously mentioned. And I knew of several things he did in our community. But after he died, many people told me about my dad. And I'm just going to stop for a minute because I'm going to look at the picture. I'm going to look at the picture and see what's up there. But this was actually a picture that has my grandmother in it and her brother. And I don't know, I got it actually off of the Abingdon Historical Site. And it, you know, I think it's when they were in school, because it's way, you know, it's way back, but they got the names on it. It's really nice that everybody in that picture is named. And so, there's the names of them, but it tells everybody in that picture. And I was so surprised when I looked on there and seen that they were all, you know, everybody in that picture was named. So, you know, you might want to look at that, or go, maybe I'll put it online or something so you can look. You might know some people in that picture, and probably do. My father died in 1967, as I previously mentioned, when I was 16, and I knew several things he did in our community. But after he died, many people told me about my dad, about the many things he did in the community and for the community. As well, not only was his family important in bettering their lives, but also his community and the lives of the fellow citizens. He worked at the Abingdon Pottery for 40 years. When he was 15, his dad, my grandfather, had died. My dad went to work at night after school to help support his mother. He swept the floors of the pottery slick from the casters, and you know, that's kind of the stuff that gets cut off when they're doing the casting and things, and the areas in the evening after school. The Abingdon Pottery was built in 1908. My father worked there from 1925 till 1967 when he died. My mom and other people told me stories about my dad playing baseball. This was a time when Abingdon was going to play in the state tournament. And I said baseball, but I meant basketball. My dad ended up not being able to go because the team would be staying all night there. And at that time, a black person had to be out of town by, I think it was sunset it said. And so he couldn't go, so the whole team had, you know, people told me stories, you know, like people like John Lewis that used to play ball with my dad and that. He said, you know, we weren't going to go because we thought if he couldn't go, we weren't going to go. But he told them to go ahead and go because they deserved it. You know, they deserved to go to state. So I think we have a couple pictures of the basketball team. Yeah, go ahead and flip. I'm not good at the PowerPoint. This is the first one I did, so. Okay, so that basketball does look like, okay. And there's probably another one too.
Yep.
They're pretty neat, aren't they? And old.
Just don't wear shorts like that anymore.
Besides basketball, he played football and he ran track. I was told he was good at all of them. I knew he was a quarterback sometimes when he played football, and also he was a field goal kicker. He also played baseball, and my mother, and I was told he used a big pop bottle bat, and I don't even think they make them anymore, where they're real long and heavy, and they said he was a good hitter with it. He could just really hit good. They say he probably would have played professional baseball, but at the time, you know, they weren't letting black people into the league. But a black league did come and ask him to come and play for him. But at the time, he was taking care of his mama, and you know, there's no family, so there's no one to take care of her. So he didn't go. When we were kids, my dad was still playing ball, though. You know, I think he played ball to maybe he was 45. That'll be an estimate, I'm not sure, but 45, 50, he was still playing ball. We were probably at the ballpark, I would say 3 or 4 nights a week, and if he wasn't playing ball, he was watching it. And if he wasn't watching it, then he was coaching the boys' youth team, youth league. And then also he coached the Legion ball for a while too. And I think there's a picture of him, you can flip it one, and I think there, go back one. Can you go back? Just do the arrow on the other side. Can you do it? Yeah, that's a picture of him in his ball uniform when he played ball for the Pottery. Every year there was a chicken barbecue at the ballpark, and my dad had made the recipe for spraying the chicken to roast it outside. And we still have that recipe. My sister Janet has it in a cookbook. You know, in all of her million things she's got packed away, and I keep saying, get that recipe out because it's so good, you know, to do the, you know, to spray the chicken with the barbecue it. He was a Boy Scout leader for many years. And this is a picture, and actually Dave Poland, I think, you know, there's several people our age in this picture that we would know. I think Rich Witherall was in there, and David Draper's in that picture with my dad and that. And my sister told me this picture was, they went to Springfield for something. There's something big doings going on at Springfield, and that's a picture of them down there. And she said, don't you remember? We went down there too, and we walked in there's an old cemetery down there by where they were at, and we walked in the cemetery and stuff, and why they were doing whatever the Boy Scouts were doing. You know, Robin remembered it, but I didn't remember it. He seemed to be very popular, and everyone seemed to love him. After he died, the Kiwanis Club at Abingdon presented my mom for my father the Citizenship Award for his dedication and exemplary service to his community. And that's the Boy Scout plaque, and the next one, you can flip it again, is the award, you know, that went with it, and it's a big, that's actually a copy of the plaque that they give him for his work with the community. My dad also sang in the Galesburg Chorus. And I'm not sure what year, I'll look at the book. I was going to look it up because that book has, over there on the table, there's a book from the Galesburg Chorus, and I think it's like in the 50s or whatever. And it's the Messiah they were singing at that time. And it has the names of all the people that sang in the Galesburg Chorus. So he was actually attached to Galesburg too, in many ways. And so that's pretty neat. My mother, she worked at the Galesburg Mental Health Center until she died in 1982. She was a busy lady with 7 kids. My grandmother, who we lived with, she did most of the cooking and some of the cleaning until she couldn't anymore. Believe me, she got around good until my father died. That must have seemed to take the wind out of her. But when I think of my grandmother, you can flip it, that's my mother. And that's my mother and my mother's sister.
Okay.
That's my brother Philip, so I guess I don't have my grandmother's picture in there right now, but there's probably one over there. My mother worked at the Galesburg Mental Health Center until she died. She was a busy lady, like I said. I think about we live with my grandma, and I don't know how my mother liked that, but you know, I thought, I wouldn't want to live with my mother-in-law all those years. You know, so I give her credit for being able to do that, because I wouldn't. Nothing against my mother-in-law, I just wouldn't want to live with her. And when we were kids, my grandmother, like I said, she was deaf most of the time, but we couldn't get out we'd want to go out the back door and sneak away to go somewhere or do something, and she'd darn near beat us there, because and my mom said it's the vibration, you know, she had all those other senses working for her, but we couldn't get around the house fast enough. She'd be at the door and like, get right back here. So, you know, but we loved her anyway. We lived on the east side of town, on the edge of town. There was about 4 other homes at the time that were down that street. You know, there's some up the street, but down the street. And then across the street was a dairy farm. As I got older, I realized that these 4 houses were in city limits, but the dairy farm, which was right at catty corner across the street, was in the country. You know, that's how the mail was set up and how the city bounds was set up. We loved that dairy farm. We spent many a day over there playing, you know, stealing eggs, you know. Well, we really didn't steal them, but we did. Because they would say, "You girls want to go collect eggs for us?" And we'd say, "Yeah." "Well, one for you, one for us," you know. So, because we always wanted to have eggs to throw at things. So that dairy farm was nice. And it was a dairy farm, and they didn't mind. We could go in there and get milk. Nice ice cold milk, you know, it was so cold in the bulk tank. So we played with the neighborhood kids and had some good times. We rode our bikes together and played some of the games that you might have played, like hide and seek, you know, Mother May I, Green Light. You know, that's the kind of games we played back then. We didn't have an Xbox or a, you know, PS4 or whatever it's called. And we didn't even have a cell phone. We never had a telephone, so we sure didn't play with any of those things. To tell you the truth, I guess I didn't realize, so to speak, that I was black. And I didn't realize that we were the only black children in town. Never crossed my mind when I was younger. My brother Philip was always good at getting us, as my dad said, up to no good. Him being older, he would take us older 2 or 3 for walks. About a mile out of town, there was horses, and we liked to look at them. Along the way, when in season, there was blackberries, there were raspberries, mulberries, cherries, apples, and there was an apricot tree that we loved to sit in and eat apricots along the way. And that's the picture of my brother there when he was in the service. Across the street from these horses was the city disposal plant. At that time, I really didn't know what that facility was over there, you know, clanging and making a little noise. But I presume that my brother did. One day we went down to see the horses. We usually wore our overshoes because we'd be in trouble if we walked in the cow pasture and looking at the horses and then got in the cow manure or anything that was in the field across the road from this facility. Our boots could be washed off, which we did because we still had a well in the yard that worked. You know, and it's funny there's no wells now, but that was one of my fondest memories, pumping that well. You know, and sometimes you had to prime it. You had to put water in to prime it to get the water to come up. Many people in town still had wells. And they still had outhouses, some of them. But my brother, he looked over there and he said, "Let's go over there," pointing to the disposal plant. He and some other fellows had been over there and had cut a hole in the bottom of the fence surrounding the area so that we could crawl in. So, you know, us and following my brother, under the fence we went, and he showed us how to jump on and hold on to and ride the water wheel. And this is kind of a modern picture of that same thing. I went out there yesterday to take this picture because it was out there, and it was actually, you know, it would stop and then it went around, but it was more primitive, probably like, it reminded me kind of a flattened out octopus, so it was just wheels out. And he showed us how to jump on that like a merry-go-round, and we'd go down there and ride that thing, you know, why not? We did it, we did it every so often for a while. You know, we didn't know it was a disposal plant, you know, we didn't know what that was at that time. I think he did, but we didn't. But anyway, one day while we were riding this thing, a city worker came and saw us. We ran, and under the fence we went, and we ran home. My brother said, "Don't be telling Dad either." And of course, we weren't going to do it. We never thought about it anymore that day until my dad came home from work, and he was mad. He told us to never go down there again, or we would get our other ends, as he called it, whipped. He said, "It's a disposal plant, and hard telling what you can get or catch by being down there." When we got in trouble, we usually all went out and we collected on the front porch. We had a nice big front porch and we collected out there. we were discussing how this man knew who we were. My mom heard us and said, well, you're the only little Negro kids in town. How do you think they knew? Heck, we didn't know this, and that is probably my first thoughts about being black, or Negro as they called it then, Negro. As we grew up, we met a lot of people. We spent most of our younger days at the ballpark. Us 4 older girls were in the Girl Scouts. And I think there's a little, I couldn't figure out how to get that to go over, so there's a little picture of us in the Girl Scouts. When in the 6th grade, my sisters and I took my older brother's paper route over. We delivered papers for several years. We started out with about 125 papers, but we ended up with many, many more papers than you can count per night. Because every time someone put their paper out, my dad would say, oh, my girls will deliver them. You know, and so, you know, we just kept getting paper routes, more paper routes. So we delivered a lot of papers, and every end of town. But delivering those papers, we got to know lots and lots of people. You know, we knew everybody in town, and even now, when people ask questions, I usually know something about someone in town. We have a get-together once a month. And they'll say, Cynthia knows who it is, you know, but it's because of that paper route that did it. In high school, Margaret, Robin, and we played in the band. Leslie began to play the clarinet in grade school, but lost interest. That's my sister Leslie over there. And was going to switch to the piano. But tragically, her piano teacher got killed in an accident. And wasn't it Mrs., what was her name? Mrs. Young. Mrs. Young. Everybody probably knew her from Abingdon, probably knew Mrs. Young. After my father died, we decided to go to the black skating party, because they still had, you know, they had black skating parties, in hopes of making some black friends. We were treated mostly with disgust. How could we live in that all-white town? And they said, we didn't talk right, we didn't dress right, and we definitely didn't dance right, and we didn't have that right rhythm. And to top it off, they said we thought we were white. Because we didn't dress right, we didn't dance right, we thought we were white. But that was kind of my first thing of knowing that people, you know, were kind of prejudiced. If we were in Galesburg at Lake Story, then on the black side, we were called, and excuse me if I don't want to offend anybody, we were called the white niggers in Abingdon, from Abingdon. Because, you know, they thought we were totally different. They thought we wanted to be white. But, you know, we just lived in Abingdon, and we loved it. You know, we lived in Abingdon, we loved that town. I mentioned the black side because, like I said, then there was, you know, there still was kind of segregation a little bit when we were young. But that's about the only prejudice I ever felt was the black people against us. You know, the town I lived in was so good to us. You know, that's why I said you never knew he was black till, you really didn't, and you still don't. You don't think about being black. So they were good. And then, I don't think this is really prejudice, but when I was in high school, I was slow dancing with a boy at a dance, a sock hop, I don't remember what it was. And up come one of the teachers, who my daughter loved dearly, but, you know, but that's okay. And she told me that I could fast dance with the white boys, but it didn't look proper for me to be slow dancing with them. But the couple of guys that I've been dancing with, they said, nah, you know, we aren't having that from her. So we did what we wanted to anyway. I went to many slumber parties, and I remember one really well. You know, I had lots of friends. A friend was having a wiener roast and a slumber party, and boys were invited till 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock the boys were supposed to leave. But you know what? My dad wouldn't let me go because he said, you never know if those boys will be sneaking back. And he wasn't. I think I was in 8th grade. Who was thinking about boys then? Not, maybe a little, but not too much. And so at 10 o'clock, my dad said, I'll be there to pick you up. And it was, and I was so embarrassed. You know, you get to that point where you're embarrassed when here comes your parents, you know. And my dad was always, at the football game, I couldn't go to the Dairy Queen, you know, you didn't need to be hanging out there. He was always there to pick us up. So I was kind of embarrassed, but I had a good time at that party anyway. After high school, I dated a young man and married him. His Italian mother was upset when she found out. We eloped when he was in the service. But after about 3 months, one day on the door, and here she came. And she acted like nothing ever happened. And one of her best friends, Hazel, said she was just waiting to see how the town was going to react before she could accept this. You know, and I could understand that. You know, she was, you know, worried what everyone was going to say. You know, her Italian son married a black lady. You know, so. But good things did happen in that little town. My sister Robin, she was elected to the student council president and was in many things. She was, and still is, the brains of our family. My sister Janet, she won the long jump in the state competition, and the only first place finish for the town so far. You know, she's still the only one that, you know, won something. It was a long jump. She did a good job. My sister Leslie over there, she always won speech contests. She won't talk to she won't hardly talk. If she's sitting with you, she won't hardly talk, but she can get up and say those speeches. And my favorite one was a sly cigarette. You know, talked about a sly cigarette, you know, picking up that bad habit, and it was a good speech. We were all fast runners, but my younger brother Artie, who we recently lost about a year ago to cancer, and my sister Margaret, they could run like the wind. You know, they probably could have beat about anybody in town. My brother could really run. And too bad he didn't, you know, stay in track and behave himself. You know, he's okay, but just, you know, you have to get good grades always to be in track. And he ran mostly track, but he, you know, but this track teacher said, you were so fast, if you quit smoking, you know, you would do really good, because he couldn't believe how fast he ran. And he always wanted him to play football because he said he could throw the football for a mile, but he didn't. Family was still and is important. Yes, we had a good life, and I still live in Abingdon. You know, 67 years I've lived in Abingdon, along with many members of my family. And the next generation has now started to take up roots in Abingdon. You know, my daughter still lives there, my son lives there. You know, some of my sisters live there, and their kids, some of them live in Abingdon. Are you flipping the pictures along? You forgot. I forgot to give you.
Exactly.
You can just flip them. You can just keep flipping. There's a picture when he gets to. There's a picture when he was flipping.
Janet.
There's my Janet at track, and then when he gets to, we had a celebration of life for my brother, and there it'll show most of the extended family now. That's some of them. That's my sister Leslie's grandson and different things. But I was talking to a friend in town just the other day, and I was talking about how good people are, because my husband died 4 years ago, and since he died, I've never had to shovel any snow. Someone always comes and does my driveway. Someone always comes and, you know, sweep my ramp off and everything. And I don't know who's doing it. I never can catch them. Like one day, Leslie's granddaughter was staying with me, and she said, a young kid came to the door, and he said he's going to sweep your ramp off, you know, and sweep your car off because we've got a lot of snow. So I hurried up, because I wasn't dressed yet. I hurried up, put a robe on and that, and I ran the door. And he was then going around the corner, and I hollered at him, but he had a snow, you know, a snow-like suit on, you know, and his sunglasses on because it was sunny. And I said, hey, come here, I'll pay you some money. And he said, it's on me, you know. And so still, to this day, 4 years later, I still haven't had to shovel any snow, which is nice. But I was telling him that how good the people were to me. And he said that living in a small town is good because we always take care of each other. So, and I love mostly everyone there. I'm going to get weepy, so just bear with me. I'm going to try not to. I'm like Tony, Denise's husband, he gets weepy too. Right, Tony? We're all right though, aren't we? I want to thank everyone here for having me come and speak to you, especially the Historical Society. Maybe some of the people here from Abingdon would like to join up with you. I think they have one in Abingdon too, don't you, Marge? Do you have a Historical Society in Abingdon? So I guess, but you can join this one too if you'd like. And I hope no one is offended by me saying white. I know the Caucasian is what you should say, but back in the day, they said white or black or Negro or whatever. It's hard for me to say Negro because I'm not used to saying it. But anyway, we had a good time. And I love the town, and I'll probably be there till I die. Thank you.